We have a lot of participants signed up today. Well, good morning if you're anywhere other than the East Coast, and good afternoon on the East Coast. This is Susan Kent. I am with Talent Connections and Career Spa, and we're happy that you've joined us today. We have a lot of participants jumping on, but I'll remind you this is our Wednesday webinar series provided by Talent Connections and Career Spa. Also, just to remind you, this is a 1-hour webinar, and if you have any technical questions, you may call 888-799-9666, extension 2. And you will be muted on this call, but we want you to use the question and answer feature to submit your questions at any time. We'll probably hold our questions until the end, but feel free if you have any questions to submit them at any time. So again, I want to remind you that this is a 1-hour webinar and we'll take questions at the end. We have, this webinar is approved for 1 SHRM Professional Development Credit, and we'll share that activity number with you at the end of the presentation. The presentation is being recorded and you will be able to view it at a later time. So let me introduce our speaker, Kevin Phillips. He founded BuildThemUp, I'm sorry. It's a campaign that equips leaders to improve organizational results by investing in the people who create the results. Kevin is a 25-year corporate executive in marketing, sales, service, and technology. He's the CEO of the KDP Group. It is a boutique professional services firm that helps clients increase profitability, improve customer loyalty, and navigate challenges of rapid growth through consulting, executive coaching, and leadership development. And I think you'll find Kevin to be very entertaining, very experienced, and this will be a lively webinar. So thank you, Kevin, for joining us.
Thank you. I am excited to be here. This is a topic that's important to me. I'm very passionate about it, and you'll probably hear a little of that passion come through. I will never forget the moment that this all started coming alive to me. It was early in my career. I was sitting across the desk from an employee, and I was stunned when I was able to finally connect dots that didn't make sense. Let me back up. I might have been 2 or 3 years into my first job managing someone else, and I worked for Bell South, and Bell South made huge investments in all of the leaders, and they sent us to classes. And so I had been to management training school where they teach you that if there's a performance issue, if an employee isn't making their goal, if they're not delivering the results that you expect, you should try to figure out what's the source of it and then coach them. And they would teach you, and they still teach, that the source of a performance problem is very often a will issue or a skill issue. And figure out which one, and that would direct how you go about coaching them. But this particular employee had me completely confused. We'd been talking for weeks, trying to figure out why was he not hitting the mark. And it was obvious to me that he had the skill. And in fact, I had seen that he could do the job and do it well. So I thought, well, it must be a will issue. But it became obvious in our conversations, this was not a will issue. He wanted to do it. And then I had that aha moment when it occurred to me that the problem wasn't will or skill, it was confidence. He didn't have the confidence to do what he had the skill and will to do. I was shocked by it and bewildered because it certainly wasn't something I had been trained for, and it wasn't something I was naturally prepared for. In fact, I couldn't imagine how someone who had a master's degree, who had secured a job in a big corporation, a job that was an important part of that work content, how they could not have confidence. You see, at no point in my life at that point had I had a single day where I viewed myself in that way. I have amazing parents and great friends and family, and I had amazing teachers and bosses who have always invested in me. and who have always encouraged me. Now, don't misunderstand. I'm not suggesting that I didn't have days when I had doubts, because I did. There have been times when I questioned that I could do something, or I was unsure whether I should even try it because I didn't anticipate that I could succeed. And there are still days like that after all these years that I still face that. But I'd always had a supportive network and people who encouraged me to go out and take the risk and try and cheerlead me. And if I failed, they would help me get back up. And I couldn't imagine how this gentleman could be in that situation. And it was affecting my results, and I had to figure it out. But it set me on a journey. And that journey was one of figuring out, what is it about confidence? And I started noticing it in other people that I worked with. Sometimes they weren't necessarily my employees, they might be peers. And as I was observing it in others, it's got me interested in trying to figure it out. So I've really been on a career-long journey to understand this. And over time, I have tried to figure out, how can I help somebody who lacks confidence build confidence? It's a big deal for me. But let me ask you this question. What does confidence look like, and what causes low self-confidence? Sometimes it's a lack of knowledge. I don't know what to do. Sometimes it's a lack of experience. I've just never done it before. I haven't built a muscle memory. Sometimes it's I have failed, and I remember that failure so deeply that I'm afraid to try again. Marines are well known for tearing down their recruits with the intent that they can then build them up in the way they want. And my commentary here is not intended as a criticism of what they do. They certainly have a different purpose. They're preparing recruits to be soldiers in war, and they need to create patterns and habits of obedience so that when they're in times of crisis, a 1 second delay can mean the loss of life. So they're trying to create a different kind of outcome, and I understand that. And there are some good things we can learn from the Marines. They certainly teach that growth occurs outside the comfort zone, and you have to push yourself to see how far you can grow yourself. And they teach teamwork and the importance of collaboration and the power of shared goals. All that's important. But this Marine model also highlights what busts confidence. And I'm going to be exaggerating for the purpose of this webinar. So I'm going to describe extreme things. And I realize that in real life, things are not always as extreme as I am describing them. But I'm doing that on purpose to try to help create the kind of difference and contrast that will help us understand this topic better. Remember Simon Cowell, how he would react to folks on American Idol? I think to some degree, he became famous for that, and how he tortured contestants as a ratings gimmick. But I think some of that too is just his nature. He's just blunt. I remember thinking oftentimes, well, what he's saying is the truth, but how he's saying it is awful. And he's saying it in front of millions of people, and that's awful. And how will these people be affected by it long term? Will the memory of Simon be in their mind every time they step on stage for the rest of their lives? Oftentimes, confidence is busted because of unrelenting criticism. But sometimes it's not unrelenting criticism. It might just be one simple statement made by one influential person. Sometimes it's unachievable standards. Sometimes it's words that are used. Hey, don't be dumb. Sometimes people who are influential have an impact far beyond what they would expect. Now, maybe there are people who are bullies and they're doing it maliciously. They want to hurt. They want to inflict. But I think more times than not, it's not so much that someone intends to hurt. Sometimes they're intending to help, but the way they go about it is misguided. They don't have the skills to deliver it well. They want you to do better, and they think the best way to help you do better is to tell you what you did wrong. And sometimes that can be a confidence buster that can last a long time. Low self-confidence shows up in a lot of ways. Sometimes it is. A person has low self-confidence in everything. It's pervasive in everything they do, but more often it's narrow. It's a lack of self-confidence maybe in certain areas. Sometimes it's obvious and everyone can see that this person has low self-confidence, but more often it's subtle. You might see the effects of low self-confidence, but you may not even recognize it to be low self-confidence. And I find that to be far more common. Sometimes that low self-confidence is debilitating. It prevents someone from taking action. They'll actually avoid or procrastinate because of it. But oftentimes it's more of an impacting effect. It's someone who's slow to act and lackluster performance. And don't forget, mediocrity is the hidden enemy of every organization. It affects decisions, relationships, creativity, how people resolve conflict, how they grow. Low self-confidence can hurt, and it hurts all day, every day, in ways that are often unseen. Let me ask you this. Are you at your personal best in the presence of any of these confidence boosters? Do you perform your best around fear and intimidation, or where you are made to feel inadequate, where you're stretched too thin, where you're micromanaged? Is that when you perform best, when you're criticized, when you're surrounded by pessimism? Is that the environment where you grow the best and perform the best? Why would anyone think that tearing someone down would improve results? It doesn't seem logical. So why are we talking about this? This is a leadership workshop. I'm not a business leader. I'm not a therapist. Yes, that's true. You're a business leader, and there are some serious mental and emotional issues that people have that require professional help. But most of what we're talking about here is not that. It's not that extreme, and it is far more pervasive than you think. Well, I can't fix this. They have to fix this. This is their problem. Yes, it's true. We can't fix someone else's problem. They have to do the heavy lifting, but they need help. And yes, it's true that this is often rooted in childhood activities and we can't fix the past. But there are adulthood contributors as well. And yes, you run a business, it's not personal, but everything is personal, because everything I am and who I am and what's affecting me emotionally at home and at work and in my faith community and in my school, all of that I carry with me everywhere I go. So I bring that to work, and it does impact results every day. What is your competitive advantage in your business, in your organization? Perhaps you have a nonprofit, or perhaps you're a leader of a faith organization. What is your competitive advantage? Your competitors can duplicate your technology and your process every day. They can match your prices. They can beat your cost structure, and they can do so pretty fast these days. But your team and their creativity and their passion and their leadership, that can't be copied. People are your competitive advantage. Human capital, there is no copy and paste. People create results, and higher profitability or better results, however you define that for your organization, ultimately depends on people. And that human potential is powerful. Leaders have the people advantage. And if they take advantage of that advantage, they can raise the roof, raise the lid, so to speak, on their organization's results. Organizations don't really create results anyway. The individuals in them do. And if you want to move the organization's results, you have to move the individual's results. And the battle for results is one member at a time. And that's why leadership is so important, because one leader sitting at the top can't influence the behavior of every individual in the organization. And that's why leaders multiply leaders who multiply leaders, so that every individual in the organization has someone leading them and encouraging them and helping dig into that human potential. So let's talk about human potential for a minute. It's easy, I think, for us to think about the contribution that we're making over time. And very often, those of us who are well invested in our career think that, oh, we've made it. We've learned, we've grown, we've been to school, we've been trained, we had great mentors, we've achieved great results, we have a long track record, our resume is amazing. And if we just keep doing what we're doing, we're good. We can, forgive me, but we can coast our way to retirement perhaps. But that's a fallacy. Because the truth is, if you keep doing tomorrow what you did today, your contribution will decrease. And the reason is because while we might stay the same, we might stop growing and getting better, the world around us is changing, constantly changing. Technology is evolving, business models are changing. There are new people introduced into the ecosystem. We have new employees coming in, new suppliers. Our customers are changing. As new generations occur, their expectations are different. A new technology is introduced, which changes consumer behavior, which forces us to change our pricing models and our sales models and our customer care models. And if we're not changing with it, our contribution is decreasing. So the only way for us to really, I'm not even going to use the word maintain, but to increase our contribution, to remain relevant, maybe that's a better way to say it. The only way for us to remain relevant is for us to grow and grow with intention, grow with focus, grow with purpose. Now we're talking about human potential here. Human potential is far more than what we're contributing today. If we're not growing, we're putting our contribution at risk. But there's more that a leader looks at, and that is, what can we do? We want to raise the roof on results. We want to contribute more. We want to increase our profits. Perhaps you're a school and you might not measure by profits. Your results might be measured in people who are being educated and trying to take on ever increasing impact in the world. Or perhaps it's a faith organization where you measure your results in some way, or it's a nonprofit where you measure your results by how many mouths are fed or how many homeless find shelter. Whatever those results are, you want to raise the roof on that. And you can raise the roof on that. You can raise the roof, but the only way you will raise the roof is if you raise the potential and the contribution of those who are in your organization. And that really is what is at stake. What's at risk is if we don't grow, our contribution is at risk. But if we don't tackle human potential, what's at stake are those results ultimately. And anything that stands in the way of that potential and that growth becomes an obstacle to our growth. So the question is, why are we talking about confidence and growth on a leadership webinar? We should be talking about how to raise results. But that is how you raise results, is you improve the performance of the individuals. And I think very often what happens is, and certainly I'm guilty of this too as a leader, is I have focused helping someone become more efficient. And there's nothing wrong with being more efficient, but that's playing a small game, because that's trying to go back, if you will, and trying to take that blue line or that green line and raise it just incrementally. But in most cases, especially if you work for a corporation that's publicly traded, where there's significant pressure to improve results over and over and over again for investors to be happy, incremental improvement doesn't usually cut it. And that's why, as a leader, we have to be focused on those things that are obstacles to that potential. Now, we can't grow for someone else, but we can create the conditions for them to grow. We can encourage them, we can invest in them, and we can champion them in that process. Why should you care? I was 6 years old, and my parents, neither of them could swim. And it was important to them that I learn to swim. And so they enrolled me in summer camp at the YMCA. And I loved it. We did all kinds of things. We had a lot of activities outside. We did some craft projects where we were building things with wood and like birdhouses, and it was a lot of fun. But part of that program was learning to swim. And I was excited about that, but I was also nervous at the same time. And I remember that the first day we were in there, it was an indoor pool in a very old building, and it had this really weird smell in there. I didn't understand that it was this chlorine captivated in an enclosed area. But the lifeguard, it was my turn to learn to swim, and I was hesitating, and I would kind of start walking toward the edge, and then I'd walk away. And he thought he would really help me, and he picked me up and he threw me in the water. And I'm sure he had seen that work for others, but it didn't work for me. It might have been effective for others. I panicked. I was breathing in water and I was gasping. I thought I was dying. I was only 6. I didn't even understand exactly what was happening. He did come get me out, and obviously I survived, but I was afraid to get near the water for a very long time after that. And to be honest with you, I did learn to swim at the age of 9. An aunt, she spent an entire summer teaching me. She was very patient. But even after I learned to swim, I was hesitant for a while. And now I love the water. I love to go vacation and snorkel, and I'm certified as scuba. I just absolutely love that. And it has opened up such a rich part of my life. But I would have never known that if I hadn't had someone patient who would help me kind of customize my learning. And I'm sure that lifeguard didn't do it maliciously, but he had an impact that lasted for years. And still, even after I learned to swim, had an impact on me. Do you ever remember seeing a child who was afraid to take a swing at Little League? Or maybe they were afraid to get in the pool. And as their parent, you know that they can hit the ball and they can learn to swim. They might not hit it the first time, but if they keep going up at bat, they can eventually make it, but they're afraid to try. And you want to encourage them along, but they're not responding. They're afraid somebody might laugh or that they may never learn. But every day in hidden ways, the adults on your team are hesitating to take a swing in a similar way. And while you may not always see it, you're paying a price for it. Human potential, it's really all we've got. And it's what it takes to get those kinds of results. You can't grow for someone else, but you can help them. And that's why we're here to talk about it. What I'd like for you to do is real quickly think of two people who you think show signs of low self-confidence, one in your professional life and one in your personal life. And I'd like for you to write those names down on a piece of paper. Circle them so you can see them. And then keep thinking about them as we talk through this. What does self-confidence look like? You know, you see it in a lot of ways. It's people who see their future with full of opportunity. People who are focused not on the past, they're focused on the future, but they're very focused on acting today. They don't compare themselves to others. They compare themselves to themselves, and they're continuously growing. They only compete with themselves and who they were yesterday. They act with courage. They know the value of taking a risk, and they're resilient. They know that when they take that risk, they might fall, but they quickly get right back up and they try again. They turn those obstacles into stepping stones, and that's what confidence looks like. Let's dig in a little bit. There's a continuum of confidence here. On one side, we have low self-confidence, where someone has too little of it. What does that look like? It sometimes is in the extreme is self-loathing, someone who's embarrassed and ashamed of themselves. More often, it's timidness and someone who might be a little mousy and they're afraid. But then on the other side, there's too much confidence. We've seen that before, right? This is very often somebody who has insecurity. You wouldn't know it by looking at them because they're masking that lack of confidence in this kind of self-absorbed hubris. They might be full of doubt, but hiding behind a mask. They might very well be dissatisfied with themselves and feel inferior, but they come across as arrogant and self-appointed, and very often that translates into a condescending attitude. Now, both of these extremes of confidence are dangerous. They're maybe dangerous is the wrong word. They are ineffective and they cause dysfunction. And you've seen it before. Really, the confidence that I'm talking about is where you strengthen that low self-confidence and moderate that high self-confidence to something that I'm going to call humble self-confidence. This is where someone is focused on others, less on themselves. They have that self-confidence and that positivity, and they're not really full of doubt, but they're ever growing because they know there's more for them. They know they can get better. They're humble and they're modest. They're assured and they're bold when they need to be, and they're courageous when they need to be, and they pick themselves up when they need to. Self-doubt breeds self-dissatisfaction that feeds fear, it impedes performance, it prevents growth, and it destroys influence. And that's what we as leaders, that's really all we have is influence. On the other hand, hubris, it breeds a strong self-satisfaction that ends growth. People usually aren't growing when they are so prideful. It raises complacency because they very often think they have already arrived and they don't need to grow anymore. It misdirects their performance. They're often focused on the wrong things, or they're tackling things too hard when they ought to back off. They have destroyed their influence. So the goal here is to strengthen low self-confidence, moderate I don't want to say high self-confidence, but hubris into humble self-confidence. So let me ask, what are we looking for in someone who has this humble confidence? And there are three things. We want to see confidence expressed as someone who believes, hey, I am enough. I am worthy. I have purpose. I have gifts. I am not who I was in the past. And I don't listen to haters. That's what we want to see from someone with this humble self-confidence. We also want to see growth. We want someone who believes, hey, I can grow and I can become something else. I can reach goals. I can do something that seems foreign today, that seems impossible today. I can do it in small steps, and I'm going to take charge and do that. We want to see courage. We want to see someone who says, you know what, I'm going to take a risk. And when they fall, they are able to bounce back. Someone who takes one step at a time, and they understand that that's the formula. So let me ask again, why are we talking about this today? What can leaders do to create that in their people? And I want to challenge you, never underestimate your influence on people. Sometimes you have influence because you are their boss. You may hold their paycheck in front of them. But more often, influence is expressed less through formal roles like that. It's through relationships that are built. It is through caring for someone. It's through becoming personally acquainted with them and investing in them personally. And when you have influence with someone, you can make an impact. And so as leaders, there are three big things I think we can do. And the first one is we can believe in someone. We can see it. We can see their strengths. We can see their gifts. We can see that there's a bigger picture here. Sometimes people don't have the outlet they need because they're so caught in the weeds. The noise around them is so loud. And right now is a perfect time with the crisis going on. I even find myself getting so caught up with what's going on and all the possible things that can happen and the uncertainty that I lose sight of the bigger picture now. And as a leader, we are often in a position where we can, and absolutely in a position where we should, help people see there's a bigger picture. There's more than the weeds that you're in today. Help lift someone's focus over the trees so they can see the forest. This is about being a believer in people. I heard Paul Martinelli, who is an amazing speaker, he says it this way. He says, loan them your belief. People often don't believe in themselves. And in that case, as leaders, we can loan them our belief in them because we see something they don't see. Take the lid off. Help them realize that you see that they have potential far beyond what they are living and maybe even what they see themselves. And this, I think, also involves overlooking people's rough edges to see that those rough edges can be smoothed out. And when they do, what will blossom on the other end of that will be a beautiful flower. And very often, I grew up, I had lots of rough edges, but I was able to be surrounded by people who saw beyond those rough edges. And so as a leader, this is about seeing beyond that. And I think there's a continuum here. We talked about this earlier. You want to encourage, you don't want to have a situation where you're helping somebody get to the point where they have hubris, because then that's destructive for them. So you want to help them get to that place of humility. But there's a second thing as leaders we can do. We talked about believing in them and seeing things in them, but we also want to help equip them. And I think this is about saying it. This is about using our words, and not just our words. There are other ways that we can influence and help people. Nonverbals, for example, are a really good way. Rolled eyes are as strong a statement as words, in fact, sometimes stronger. So the things we do and the way we react to people and the way we are around them has a huge impact on them. This is liberating, though. You give someone feedback if you give it in the right way. And I want to recommend a book, Radical Candor by Kim Scott. She worked at Google and Apple, and she has some interesting stories to tell. But I've read the book for the third time this past January. It's excellent. And if you want more information, feel free to reach out to me separately. I'll give you contact information at the end. But I am completely convinced that her book, the premise is this, and I hope I don't massacre it, but the premise is this, is that people can't get better if you don't speak the truth to them. But they will never profit from that truth if you don't speak it from a place of love and care. And that's powerful as a leader. It's also hard. I've been trying to do better at this all my life, and I'm still learning. But this is about helping people stretch. This is about helping them collaborate, coaching them, holding them accountable. That's a significant part. Not in a way where you have a stick and you're hitting somebody about it, but rather in a way that you are lifting them up and you're encouraging them, and you're doing it as a way for their profit. This is also about helping people get to their comfort zone. Learning never occurs when you're comfortable. It's always at a place of discomfort, outside of your comfort zone. But there's also, you have to be concerned about pushing people to their comfort zone is important, but beyond, you don't want to push them over the edge, right? So as a leader, helping get people to the right place is an important part of this. There's a continuum here too, because there's a too much and a too little that we want to avoid. Too little of this too little truth and love might be expressed as false praise. And that's not helpful to someone. In fact, it's not constructive at all, because people get a false sense. They're not dealing with reality. But harsh criticism, on the other hand, isn't really helpful either. It often causes people to retreat. It causes a lot of self-doubt. And that's why I think this book by Kim is so helpful. It at least has been for me, and I encourage you to pursue that. But let me share a story. One of my most impactful mentors demonstrated this equipping better than anybody else. Her name was Gail, and she is now retired, and I still call her for advice. But I don't know, maybe 10 years into my career, she called me up and she said, I have an opportunity for you. I want to recommend you for a role. It would be a 1-year temporary loan, and it would be a great developmental assignment for you. You'll learn a lot. And there were many positive attributes about it. And there were some scary things about it. Gail, I found out later, had been in a meeting. She heard about this corporate opportunity managing an interdepartmental team for, at the time it was Bell South, now AT&T. And she thought I'd be a good candidate for it. And she fought for me to get that spot. And I got it. I took it. I was there for a year. I learned so much. It was stressful in so many ways. It was beneficial in so many ways. I ended up working for one of the smartest and yet most difficult bosses I've ever met. And that sped up a lot of my growth in ways that I couldn't have imagined. It's not something I even knew to go. I didn't even know the job was there, but she was acting as a leader. She was trying to equip me. She was looking out for me and finding opportunities that might help me grow. And that's the kind of leadership that I'm talking about here with this notion of equipping and helping someone grow. It's not something I could have done for myself. It's something I needed someone to help me with. False praise, it can reduce trust, especially because people might appreciate hearing it. We all like to hear good things, but people usually know it's insincere and fake. And then if they don't know that it's insincere, when they find out that it was fake, then they don't trust what you say in the future. It sets bad expectations about what good looks like. And that's not helpful for anybody. Anyone who's going to grow needs to know what good and great look like. And ultimately, it can disappoint somebody when life doesn't reward that. If I'm praising them for it, but life's not rewarding them for it, they'll figure that out. Great effort leads to great progress, and great progress leads to great results. And those are the things that we should be praising effort and praising progress and praising results. We shouldn't be praising mediocrity. I'm not suggesting, when I say praise effort and praise progress, I'm not saying you praise the mediocrity, but you praise their improvement, and you praise their courage, and you praise every time they get up from failure, and you praise what they've learned from that failure. And when you see them taking that learning and they're applying it in their life and applying it in a new way, you praise that. You praise their creativity when they fail and they get back up and they try something in a different way. Praise consistency. One of the most effective things any of us can do in almost any aspect of our life to conquer anything is to take small steps consistently, day after day after day after day. It's the power of compounding. It works in finance. It's how we build retirement funds, right? We invest a little bit and they grow a little bit every day, but every day it's building on the previous day's growth. So eventually it becomes something meaningful, but every day it may not seem like much. So praise their consistent investment, praise their positive attitude. And oftentimes, one of the best things you can do is praise someone's character strength. When you see someone doing something difficult, demonstrating courage of conviction, doing what's right even though it might not be popular, doing what's right even though it might not be personally advantageous, praising those kinds of things lead to great growth. When you see someone winning with grace and humility, praise it. When you see someone lose with a spirit of teamwork and celebrating other people's accomplishment, praise it. Encourage them to build their tribe. This is also very important. We are who we are around. And if we want to change who we are, one of the best techniques is to change who we're around. Be deliberate and intentional about who you surround yourself with as a leader, but encourage those that you're leading to do the same thing. It's important for them to grow. If you want to grow, find someone who's 2 or 3 steps ahead of you and build a relationship with them and encourage those who you are working with to do the same thing. So we want to believe in them. We want to see what's great about them, and then we want to equip them, and we want to say it, but we also want to encourage. We want to show them what they are able to do. We want to show them that we're invested in them by cheering them along. We want to show them by showing up. And I think that's a helpful thing. This is really almost a message of hope and possibilities. We're standing along the sidelines as they're learning and growing and making failures along the way and learning from that and getting back up. We become their chief encourager. And we stamp out giving up. When we see them giving in to the pressure of not trying again, that's when we step in and offer that added dose of encouragement. Or perhaps we see an opportunity for them and we help them find it, and it might be scary. We give them wings and let them fly, but we're never so far away that we can't cheer them on a little more. This is also an important place where we show that we believe in them, if you will, by building relationship and trust. Relationship is the magic that helps a leader open someone up in a way that they can then tap into their human potential. In fact, it's probably impossible to help somebody grow if you don't have some amount of relationship with them. And I'm not suggesting that if we're in a professional environment, I'm not suggesting relationships that are unnatural or unprofessional. And I think you know that. I'm talking about a professional relationship, but it is still a personal relationship, one where you get to know them and you know things about them, and you know about their family and probably even know their names of their children, and you know that their son is in Little League and he has the chance to go to the regional championship, and their daughter just was accepted into college in a program that she was excited about. And showing up, I think, means that you attend important events in their life. Maybe a parent with their parent has an illness, and maybe you send a card to their parent, or maybe you send flowers to the hospital, or they have a death in the family of someone important and you attend the funeral, or you text them on a special day. Yeah, this might seem strange, but it really shouldn't be strange, because we're all people and we depend on relationships. And this is how you build relationships, especially the kinds of relationships where you can influence someone and influence their growth. And then even in the workplace, show up at important meetings. I often would have my mentors show up to meetings where they had no natural reason to be there, but I was presenting, and they would show up to offer moral support. Another thing you can do to show your encouragement is to delegate and then get out of the way. Micromanaging is usually more about the insecurity of the leader than it is about the poor performance of the team member. Now, granted, there are people who don't yet have skills and they need some help, and a leader should be involved to help them learn and grow. But micromanaging doesn't help them grow. All micromanaging does is reduce the amount of influence and capability the leader has. It takes off the leader's to-do list things that only the leader can do, and it delegates up to the leader things that really the team should be doing. And the team will never be able to achieve it if they don't do it. And there are situations where there are performance issues, and you have to manage those performance issues. I'm not suggesting here that people wouldn't at some point need to be terminated. There are cases where you cannot get someone, for a lot of reasons, you can't get someone's performance in alignment. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about most people whose performance can be improved through investment and growth. Another way to show it is to give people permission. They may have an idea that you're not sure would even work, but if it could work, it'd be great. And it might be our nature sometimes in business not to take some risks like that. But sometimes it's a good idea to give somebody permission to go try something. Put some parameters around it so it doesn't go on too long or get wild and crazy, but give them permission to go experiment. And another way to show it is never keep score. Never keep score of mistakes and failures. Once someone's made a mistake, you talk about it, you coach about it, that's the end of it. Don't bring it back up again. But you should keep score when they get back up from failures, when they try again, when they demonstrate creative potential. That's the kind of thing to keep score of. That's a great way to show encouragement. And also, don't lose sight of the goal. Support them when they struggle and fail, but let them experience the pain and the struggle, because that's part of growth. That's part of learning. Push them to stretch. There's so many more things we could talk about here, but there's a continuum here that we need to talk about as well. Too little encouragement is like putting somebody in a car without a seatbelt. And that's not healthy. But too much is like bubble wrap. You can't grow like that. And so what we're really talking about here is, as a leader, is having guardrails where you let people, encourage people to experience risk and learn from failure, but you still have your hands in it enough so that it can't get out of hand, so it doesn't become destructive. One of my favorite mentors, his name is Ron. It's a really long story, and it's probably the best job I ever had. It was also the worst job I ever had, but I was asked to take over a job. I had to transform the organization. If I didn't, I knew that everybody would be outsourced. I couldn't tell people that. Every aspect of our metrics were bad. Customers were unhappy with us. The finance team thought our operational performance was awful. Leaders were unhappy, and our employee dissatisfaction was at an all-time low. And I stepped into this job. I worked really hard. And 2 years later, we had turned things around, and it was time for me to move on to a new role. And Ron called me into his office as we were talking about my new role. And he said, "Hey, Kevin, do something for me. I need you to make a list of all the metrics for the job you're leaving, and what the metric performance was when you got there and what it is now." And I said, okay. So I did it, and I sent it to him. And he called me up, and he said, hey, I got this document, but instead of me reading it, what's the takeaway? And I said, well, we had some good improvement, this and that. And he said, well, what about so-and-so? I said, yeah, we had triple-digit improvement on that. And he said, well, what about so-and-so? I said, yeah, we had double-digit. He said, well, how many of these metrics improved during your tenure? And I said, well, let's see, all of them. And he said, well, by how much? And I said, oh, wait, all of them improved double or triple digits. And he said, oh, that was pretty impressive, wasn't it? And I left, and it dawned on me. Ron had asked me to create that document, not for him, but for me. He didn't tell me that's what it was for, but he realized I was leaving because I felt like things were not at the level of performance I wanted them to be. I had lost sight that things were far better than they had been when I got there. And that's the kind of leader we're talking about here with encouraging. Now think back at the two people that you identified. One from your professional life and one from your personal life. For each one of them, I'd like to challenge you to think of one thing that you can do for each of them over the next week or 2 weeks or month that might encourage them, that might help equip them, that might demonstrate that you believe in them, that might build them up. They don't even have to know you're doing it. It may not have to be obvious, or if it's something that you're going to do that they might say, oh, well, they've never done that before. They don't even have to know why. But I want to encourage all of you to choose a personal and a professional example where you make an investment. And that personal example, that might even be a child or a grandchild or a niece or nephew. Very often I find that I don't have children, but I live vicariously through the children of my family and friends. And I love to invest in those kids. They don't know what I'm doing. They don't realize, and they may never realize, but I love to cheer them up, and I love to recognize their accomplishment. And when they're having a bad day or they've had a bad ball game or something like that, I love to step in and try to encourage them. I want to encourage you to make such a concerted effort like that in light of what we've been talking about. Just to summarize again, the blue triangle on the left, this is what the goal would be for all the individuals in our lives, our employees and our children and our those that we lead. We want them to have confidence. We want them to be growing. We want them to have courage. And as leaders, the green box is what we should be doing, believing in them, working and actively helping equip them and encouraging them. And we can do this in a lot of places besides work. Work is absolutely an important place, but we are involved in a lot of other organizations where we can do this, and we can touch a lot of people, and we should touch those people. I mentioned Paul Martinelli earlier. He's very inspiring. He's a great speaker. And he said something I won't forget. You will never outperform your own self-image. And that's true for each of us, but it's also true for the people we lead. And all of us want those that we lead to perform at a higher level. And very often it is their self-image that may get in the way. And we can't fix it for them. And there are boundaries that we have to stay within. But we have a need to help them gain the confidence to succeed and to perform better. We have the ability to help them grow into their potential. We should. If you would like a copy of today's slides, you can go to kevinphillipsslides.com and you can subscribe to my newsletter and you'll get a download of the slides. And if you'd like to connect with me, get my website or connect on social media, I'd love to interact with you. You can also gain access to my email, howdykevin.com. Yeah, it's a little bit of humor. I'm a Southern boy, born and raised, and so that kind of captures that a little bit. I welcome you to interact with me and reach out. I'd love to do that. And we'll open it up for some Q&A here. And I think, Susan, you're going to facilitate that.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Kevin. And for those of you that have questions, we have some, but feel free to go ahead and use the Q&A feature and submit your questions. So we have some time remaining. And Kevin, let me just give you the first question here. The first question, I'm not a CEO. I can't make all the changes. What can I do if I'm not in charge?
Well, that's a great question. Much of what I have talked about would best be manifested if the culture reflected these attributes, right? If every aspect of the organization supported believing in others and equipping others and encouraging others. And the truth is, there are many companies where this is a significant part of their culture, but there are also many where it's not their natural. So the truth is, each of us is one person. If we're the CEO, we can have an influence on the entire organization's culture. If we're a department head, we might only be able to affect the culture of that one department. And certainly there are probably limits to what we can do. If we have a team, and we may have 6 or 7 direct reports, we can influence that team, but there are limits to that, and I understand that. What I would say is, because we can't boil the ocean, doesn't mean we can't affect the area where we are. We all have the ability to impact one. In fact, one of my favorite, a lady who worked for me, her name is Lily Wills. She lives in Chattanooga. It's a lovely city in the Southeast if you've never been. And I stay in touch with her. She's retired, but I watched Lily and I learned so much from her. Everybody that she was around, she practiced these attributes. If they worked for her, if they were her peer, and she even practiced these attributes on me. I didn't realize it at the time, but she was building up. You hear the term managing up. So I think all of us can influence the people in our lives, even if it's just one person, or even if it's just 3 people, it'll make an impact.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Another question. I work with a bunch of drivers. They only care about results and have no tolerance for the touchy-feely soft skills. So how can I influence them?
Well, I used to be one of those drivers who had no tolerance for touchy-feely, and I know a lot of people who are like that still. I think I changed because it doesn't matter how analytical you are or what kind of driver you are. It's hard to argue with results that you see. And in my life, I've been around people who practice this quote unquote touchy-feely stuff. And then I realized they are achieving better results than I am. And so that got me started down the path of realizing something different. I would not recommend you tackle somebody who doesn't believe in touchy-feely stuff. I wouldn't argue with them. You're not going to convince them. And so you're just going to waste your breath. I would simply focus where you can make a difference. And you're probably not going to convince somebody with words who doesn't believe in touchy-feely. and I would argue this is not just touchy-feely, but I get the reference. I would instead focus where you can make a difference, and those differences will speak for themselves. And those people who resist the touchy-feely, they'll have a hard time arguing with the results they see.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Another question: how can you gauge if you're getting into territory that maybe belongs in therapy? When is it an employee development issue, and when is it something that a therapist should deal with?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I'll tell you a personal example in my life. I had an employee who had a performance problem, and my boss called me and said, "Hey, we're moving," her name was Valerie, "we're moving Valerie to your team. We need you to fire her." And I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, she's been passed from team to team. She's not very good. She's doesn't seem capable of learning. And we know that you'll deal with the problem." And I said, "I can't just fire somebody. I mean, I have to work with them, and I don't have time. I've got a busy job." And he's like, "Well, it's happening." So she came over, and 6 months later, I was dealing with her performance. I was dealing with results. I was doing all the things that my HR support team supported or encouraged me to do. I didn't talk about personal stuff. And she started bringing up personal stuff, and I got nervous. And by the way, I still get nervous when people do that today. But in the course of that, she started crying one day. And that's when it dawned on me that this situation was deeper than I needed to be tackling. And that my role wasn't really to try to help her solve those issues, but my role was to help her get to help. And so I called, I had the luxury of an HR department, and probably most of you do, and many of you work in human resources, so this is your area of expertise. And they were able to provide me some resources that I could provide her where she could call and get some help. And so in that particular case, when I recognized that there were some deeper issues that needed to be resolved, that's when I reached out and got her some help. And she took advantage of them. I mean, I can't make her take advantage of those. And the beautiful thing about that is it was slow, but she turned things around as a result of that. Good question.
Good, thank you. Let's see, another question. Hold just 1 minute. Sometimes people say, "I am too flowery about how I give feedback, and they just want me to cut to the chase." They say that, but I worry about blasting someone. How much positioning of the feedback or context is appropriate? Aren't we supposed to be positive about how we handle feedback?
Yeah, I love that question. And I'm going to give you my view on it, but I recommend you read Kim Scott's book, Radical Candor, because she talks about this. She, like me, started her career being more direct. In fact, there's another story I'm embarrassed to tell, but I'll tell. I had an employee, we were dealing with a performance issue. We met every Friday afternoon. That probably was the wrong day of the week to do it, but I didn't know it at the time. And we were all exhausted because the week was long. It was the end of the day. And we would meet to talk about her performance. And I was just holding the mirror up in front of her. I was unrelenting. And that's kind of my nature. So I've had to work hard to manage around that and to learn how to lead and not let that get in the way. But I was delivering nothing flowery. I mean, I was harsh, and it was getting us nowhere. And so I sought the help of one of my mentors. I mentioned to her earlier, Gail. I reached out to her and asked her what she recommended. And she suggested that I learn to hunt things positive. I didn't see the positive things. They were there, but I was so focused on the mistakes so I guess what I'm saying is I had a different example, and I had to work hard to learn how to find things that was an advantage that she was bringing to the table. And I think if you're too flowery, I think the danger is that you end up with false praise, and you don't give enough of the truth for somebody to actually see what they need to go work on. And that probably implies that you need to work as hard as I did in the opposite direction to figure out, how do you speak the truth? How do you tell somebody the truth? Yes, you should find the positive things, but not to the extent that you overlook the important truths that need to be shared.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Another question: how do you keep the norms brought into the workplace by bullies from becoming the norms of the organization?
That is especially hard if your boss or higher up leaders are bullies, because bullies tend to not only set an example, but they tend to hire other bullies. They tend to reward bullies. They do everything that makes bullying more prevalent. And that's obviously a challenge. And if they're higher up in the organization, it's harder for you to deal with. But when I have people on my team, people who have more control over, I talk to them directly about their behavior. Very often I've found they enjoy it. They like tormenting somebody else. They like to see people squirm. And if that's the case, I have a different problem to solve, because the more frequent issue is when they don't even realize they're being a bully. They think they're being helpful. They think they're challenging the team to better performance, and they don't realize the impact they're having. If it's the latter, my job is to help them see how their performance is actually, their bullying is actually hurting team performance. If it's somebody who enjoys bullying, that's a different conversation. And I'm going to be honest, the way I handle that is, when I recognize somebody's enjoying it, then that's when I lean more heavily on truth. And it's not that I forget about the in love and in the in care part, but I confront them about it, and I let them know it's not acceptable. And that if I see it, I'm not going to embarrass them. But every time I see it, I'm going to call them out on it after that meeting or whatever the occasion is. And I'm not going to tolerate it. If it doesn't get better, they're not going to be on my team.
Kevin, have you had to address that when that bully is the leader or your manager?
I have. I mentioned that one of the jobs I had was a leadership opportunity where I had the best boss and worst boss at the same time. And she was a bully. And we don't have time for the whole story, but I had my direct reports were making a presentation to her, and she was having a bad day. She was yelling at them, and it escalated to that point. I couldn't understand why she was so upset. And so I finally said, look, we're going to end this meeting. We're going to go do some more homework. We'll come back. And it was a moment of personal crisis for me, because I felt like the only way for me to stop it was to put my own career in jeopardy. And I rolled the dice. I don't know that I would do this every time, but at that time I rolled the dice and I said, look, I'm not going to call her name, but look, my team's leaving right now. I will stay behind. And I did stay behind, and she yelled at me, and they could hear her yelling at me in the hall. The very next day, she called me and apologized. And I knew that was an opportunity for a turning moment, but it could have easily ended badly for me. In that particular case, it didn't. But you can't control other people, and especially not a boss, but sometimes you may have to make a decision.
True. And having a leader that builds them up makes the team want to do the same. I know I've seen that, and I personally have been in a couple of workplaces where I see those results. When the leader is acting one way, that usually drives the team to act that way.
I think that's true.
Okay, I have probably one last question given our time. Isn't it true that trees grow stronger in hostile environments? They grow deeper roots when they battle the elements. Does that build them up philosophy create too safe of an environment?
No, that's a really good question. And the answer is yes and no. I think it's true that trees do grow stronger when they're faced the elements. Their roots grow deeper. And my parents had a tornado hit their house several years ago, and the pine trees that have shallow roots actually fell on the house, but the stronger trees did not. So I think that's true. To me, Build Them Up is not about creating a bubble wrap environment. In fact, I specifically said that. It is about creating conditions where you encourage risk taking and you build up courage. So you want people, in fact, I think one of the last slides talked about the guardrails. You don't want a no seatbelts environment. You don't want a, bubble wrap environment. You want people to take risk and experience the realities of life, but you want them to do it in a way that they learn from it and aren't destroyed by it. And so I think there's a delicate balance there.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Well, I think we've run out of time today, but I encourage you, if you have any follow-up questions, to contact Kevin directly. But for this webinar, the activity number is 20-ZDR. R4F, and that has been approved for 1 professional development credit for recertification through SHRM. Please visit our website at talentconnections.net for upcoming webinars, as well as a recording of this and previously recorded webinars that you can view. So Kevin, thank you again. And just to remind you, his contact information, Kevin.
HowdyKevin.com.
Yes, great. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again next month.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Kevin.